all here.
Oh, meeting to order. Attendance, please.
Artist. Here. Don.
Here.
Grant.
Here.
Jim.
Here.
Mike.
Here.
Pam.
Here.
Rod.
Present.
Toby.
Here. Right, please stand and join us in the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Board, I need a motion for approval of this afternoon's agenda. Second. Which has been made and seconded to approve the agenda. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Agenda is approved. Citizen comment. Do we have any written or verbal comments this afternoon? Right, seeing none, we'll go right by that one. I'll need a motion to approve the minutes from September 19th, 2024.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve the minutes from September 19th, 2024. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Next, Saddle Tramp Berkmeyer appeal to the Board of Health, which is an action item. And I guess we can let Jim give us a report on that.
Good afternoon, I'm Jim Wardensky with Environmental Health, and what you have before you is an appeal to the Board of Health, excuse me, regarding an incinerator system that's been applied for. The area is, if you're familiar with Star Meadows area outside of Whitefish there. The health officer received the appeal to her, let's see, September 26th. And she reviewed that and upheld the denial from the environmental health staff on it. If you recall, in dealing with the incinerator system, the one that we had out at Ashley Lake, really what they're trying to accomplish here is to go through the appeals process so they can get to the variance process regarding that waste segregation component of the regulations. So essentially the subcommittee met on this or I guess we discussed it, asked if we needed to have a subcommittee meeting because it was really pretty rudimentary, similar to the other one. The subcommittee stated that probably we could just bring it to the board here and you could make a determination on whether or not you want to deny the appeal and then allow them to go to the variance process. So if you have any questions about that or again, very, very similar to the last one where really the hiccup with this is that the regulations haven't caught up with technology. Where the incinerator system handles all of the wastewater, gray water and black water. The regulations say that they have to be separated. And really it's not a requirement because it deals with it all. Again, just as a refresher, the appeals process is just to determine that the environmental health staff has interpreted and applied the rules correctly. And if you find that we've done that, then you should deny the appeal. And then that frees them up to go to the variance process, apply for a variance regarding the waste segregation, and then you can vote on that. So.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you.
Okay.
May I have a motion?
I will make a motion to deny.
Okay, second. Motion's been made and seconded to deny the appeal and uphold the health officer's determination. May I have a roll call on this, please?
Artist.
Yes.
Don. Grant,
Yes.
Jim,
I'm not sure. Can I postpone? Or delay till the end? I need to think about this for a second.
Mike,
Yes.
Pam,
Yes.
Rod,
Yes.
Toby.
Yes. Jim, did you have, I'm sorry, I didn't ask you if you had any further questions, but you need to,
Well,
you just abstaining from it.
yeah, I'm gonna abstain because I don't have enough information to make a decision on this right now because of the additional information that was provided to me. And I just think I would be making a decision without having before briefed on.
Right? So noted, the motion is approved, to deny. And we'll be looking for a variance.
Just one quick question, it didn't look like there was any monitoring that ever happened on this property, it's just simply the fact that it's pretty much a wetland. What it looks like is a wetland.
Quite honestly, Jim can answer that.
Sorry.
There must have been monitoring.
Yeah. So essentially, the issue is, the slope, it's super steep slope there. That wouldn't accommodate a conventional system, and then also the wetland area. So those two factors, they've retained the, help of a consultant. The consultant went out, did the evaluation on it, and then we sent, Jake Rubo from our office went out, verified, the facts, and, said, yeah, it just won't, work for a conventional system, so. This was kind of their last option, if you will.
We should expect to see a variance probably in the next year or two.
Yeah, you know, the idea is, and again, we're somewhat reliant on, the applicant and the consultant to submit that stuff.
Yep.
There is a time constraint on that, so, we're hoping to kind of get back to, excuse me, the process of having an appeal, 1 month and a variance the next month. Some of these, like the next agenda item that you're gonna encounter, there's an appeal and a variance at the same time. And, you know, we wanna try and avoid that if we can, so.
Thank you.
Do we expect to have any guidance revolving around the use of incinerator systems?
We had that a couple months ago. We
Yeah.
had one and we actually had a workshop.
Yep, I went to the workshop and, you know, I remember making a comment when we voted on that variance that, you know, I thought these systems were great for properties like that, actually like property where it was probably, we would not allow, the county would hopefully not allow that small of a lot size in the future. But it existed, so it's a good solution for someone that has bought a home that exists and needs to put a new septic system in. But I personally don't like the idea of just thinking, oh, a septic system opens up every wetland to building homes. Because we could just throw an incinerator and put a house on stilts and build on every floodplain and open space, so. You know, I'm kind of wondering if we,
We're waiting on DEQ to try to give us some guidance. Like Jim
Yeah.
said, that their regulations are behind technology. So our hope is they're going to include that in the future, and that's why we had to consult with them so much on this
Yeah.
first one, because it really hadn't been done before. It had been done on the east side, but not over here. So hopefully DEQ will, unfortunately, our hands are tied when it comes to DEQ coming up with regulations, so.
Is your concern just more building on wetlands, not so much even septic, or is it
a
more?
little both.
And I don't know if we address like build it where people can build at this board meeting, is that something more for the commissioners of the county to?
We don't have the ability to tell people where they can build.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, the only thing we can do is tell them that they can't put a septic system there. Although in this case, this person is going to the highest level of treatment available. There is no discharge. So, and the expense is really high. So if someone wants to move forward and not jump through any more hoops because of what their consultant has said, I see no reason why we would be looking to question something like this, but we'll see when the variance comes up.
It seems more like a bookkeeping type of issue, but is there a way to streamline this so you don't have to deny the appeal and then do the variance so that when you know that that's what they're gonna do in the first place, just for Jim and his department to say, yeah, let's just go right with that, and we don't have to bother with the rest of this.
Right.
But we have to do a variance to the rules that are at the state, so we can't just say, yeah, we can just do that. We have to abide by what their procedures are in order for us to.
Who makes
grant
that
DEQ.
rule though, that we have to go deny an appeal and then go through variance? I mean, could the rules change? That's what I'm saying.
Well, it's, I'll let Jim know.
Okay.
It's, yeah.
Yeah, so there are a number of levels of regulation that we're dealing with. So in some circumstances, like specific to the incinerator system, that was kind of the thought process behind not having a subcommittee meeting. It's because, you know, we just recently went through this, we're all kind of familiar with it. Why waste the time and having a bunch of people get together and have a meeting? However, through that variance process, our regulations, the flooded county septic regulations are predicated on what's in DEQ circular 4 and then also the ARM, the administrative rules of Montana. And where it's important is in that variance process, and likely I'm gonna talk about this here in just a minute regarding the Torpin variance. But there are 11 criteria that have to be satisfied in order for the board to grant a variance. And, you know, the one that we have in appeal right now, the DEQ, that was one of the things that I guess we were chided for, is that, you know, we didn't present findings on that. We were looking at it strictly from depth to groundwater and the regulatory aspect. So now we're going to that formal hearing at some point, and we're gonna have to present findings. So, until that language gets changed where that waste segregation portion of it, we'll have to go through that, but the hope is somewhere, hopefully in the near future, that gets changed, so that way it frees us up, and then we just handle it internally through environmental health. But again, it's not only changing our county septic regulations, but then DEQ has to change their stuff. And from a legal standpoint, we've learned that if we don't offer findings on those 11 criteria, then it could be problematic for us, so.
Yeah, I have, Jim, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Real quick. And it's not clear to me. Because as we've gone through this and with the information I was originally given, you know, especially as it relates to this 48 inches of ground depth water. Can you tell me if that's a rule or is that by statute?
So it is a rule,
Okay,
and you know, that's one of the things that in the guidance from DEQ that we got in response to the one that's in appeal.
has any of the appeal, which appeal are we talking about?
The Herbert.
Yeah, have you got anybody here seen the Herbert appeal?
It's still.
Oh, we've all been
litigation.
involved in it.
Yes.
It's in legal.
Yeah.
No, but nobody's seen any of the findings or anything yet.
Well,
Have
it
any of the findings come out yet?
kind of.
Are
And
those available to everybody or not? Are they?
if you want a copy of that,
Because I think everybody should have a copy of it personally if we're making these kind of decisions.
well, that's really kind of separate from all of this.
Okay, but I just wanted to get, so a rule is fungible and a statute is not. Statute is absolute, is that correct? Or as a rule, you can kind of work around the rules? Are you sure?
Yeah, it depends. It depends on how they're linked.
Okay, so that's what I'm trying to get. So do you know that what that definition is or what those are? Or-
Well, so far,
Okay.
and again, I don't wanna
No,
get
I
off on a tangent, but so far, what DEQ has said is that you guys can grant a variance.
Okay,
However, you have to meet those 11
those
criteria.
other 11 requirements, right? And those are the ones that like contaminating state water and
Yes.
all that stuff. Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. That's what I wanted to know.
So the premise behind that whole thing was, they said, under no circumstances can you deviate from that 48 inches. But then they said, well, that was a flawed way of stating that in the regulations or the rule. So,
Okay.
essentially set that aside and focus on the fact that, yes, you can grant a variance provided, it meets those
The other
criteria.
11 requirements.
Yeah.
So it's not a hard and fast, because I've always been under the assumption that it was a hard and fast rule. So you had to, if it was 47 inches, it's too bad, but it looks to me like the DEQ has actually made it, says it's fungible, that as long as it meets these other 11 requirements, as you've indicated, that we're not bound by the 48 inch rule, because I was petrified at one time thinking that I might be, putting the county in jeopardy. And it doesn't look to be the case, because DEQ even themselves have said that it's whatever.
Right, and just for clarity here, before all of that transpired, we reached out and we reached out.
Oh,
and
I'm
we
not
reached
worried
out
about that part, I'm just worried
And,
about.
and tried to get an answer on that before it got to that
Oh,
point.
got it.
And then we got no answer, so then we felt like we were painted in a corner and said, well, we have to stand fast with what it says in the rules. Now they've issued this, these findings.
Okay,
They denied that appeal, for Mr. Herbert,
okay,
because they said he didn't satisfy those 11 criteria. But now, because we didn't generate those findings, it's gonna go to a formal appeal, where we have to go appear in court in Helena at some point. The date hasn't been set yet.
okay.
The reason that I haven't disseminated that information is because the county attorney's office is concerned about ongoing litigation and they don't want a whole bunch of information. I did provide a copy to Artis and Toby because
But it is in the public domain, the information, correct? or not?
it is,
Then
and
why would we not, we just wanna keep people in the dark?
no,
Because why would it, having the information hurt us then?
It's
It's
a
a
lawsuit, it's a lawsuit.
No, but if it's already a finding. and it's a
We
fact,
can
it's a
send it to
public
you, but
record.
it's not, it shouldn't, we're not gonna put it in a public meeting, it is a.
No,
is
but
a
I'm just saying,
lawsuit.
would it be nice to know what that information is if we're making decisions
Right.
based upon this current finding, not the finding that we.
so I think the thought process is that the more that that's discussed and the more information that's provided, potentially then you're a witness, you're a witness, you're a witness, and you could get called to this situation in Helena.
Okay,
So we're trying to minimize that.
perfect.
So, but definitely you've asked for it and the county attorney's office, said that, with the Board of Health members, if they ask for it, the reason that I provided it to Toby and Artis was in that subcommittee meeting. Some of the findings that we're gonna present in the Torpin situation, are predicated on that guidance from DEQ.
Good.
Thank you.
Yep.
Moving on. And next is the Tolman appeal to the Board of Health. The variance.
So as I previously stated, this is one of those scenarios where we have the appeal and the variance all at the same time. So I guess the first step is to, take a look at the appeals portion of it. We did have a subcommittee meeting on this, and, I think at that time, the decision was to vote to deny the appeal, uphold the health officer's, denial. And, so if you guys wanna, talk about that, or if you have
Well,
questions.
let's start there.
Okay,
Those of us on the subcommittee, listened to, both sides and made the decision to uphold the health officer's decision, to not grant the appeal. So, are there any questions concerning that before we move to a, motion, or we can go back to more questions?
I do have some questions on
Can,
Can we get a
can
motion?
we just say something first?
Sure.
So when we say we're denying this,
then I know then it goes to.
then we get to look at, it gets farther, then we can vote on what's at hand.
Okay, so see, here's my concern about that is because without adequate information prior to this, we're making decisions in the dark. And so even if I said I agree with the denial, I'm making a decision based on not all of the relevant facts as they are today. And that's the concern that I have as a board member being responsible in this issue. So that's one of the issues. And the other thing that I have is I think as I've looked through this, forget about the other stuff, and I understand that we have to go from, or I guess we're supposed to go from the denial to the, or the appeal to the variance. But it seems to me like sometimes we put an extra horse in the middle of this race that doesn't need to be there if we already kind of have an opinion now based on the facts that the outcome might be different than it was months ago. And the other question I have on this, and primarily in it, and I think it's a honest issue for me, it would be because we have two sanitarians that came up with different conclusions on this property. One in 2022 and one in 2024, within the same department with the same leadership. And I'm assuming that the applicant was probably operating under the premise, which I would have been, that it was approved in 2022, even though the application, was, became obsolete or whatever, that I'd still be working under the same assumption. So I think we all know that no two people look at the same issue the same way, but if we're gonna do that, I think it should be 3 out of 4 or 2 out of 3, rather than 1 out, because it looks like in 2022, if they would have went ahead, we would have approved it, and they would have had a septic in there.
Jim, excuse me, but that will be a discussion held. And all that information will be discussed, but at this point, you either have to accept or deny the health officer,
No,
but,
and I
and then we're gonna move forward.
But I understand, but I'm making a decision whether I am going to either one, and so I'm saying at this point, I need to have this information so I can decide, because there is a premise here that we vote either together, I guess, or we go by the whatever. I don't wanna go by the herd, I wanna go by what I feel is true, and I'm not sure that I have all the facts in this.
If you were to deny the appeal, if you were to deny my upholding of what it was,
Yes.
then they would not have the opportunity to go to a variance.
But if everybody denied it, then they would get their permit, is that correct or not?
So can I offer some
Okay,
clarification?
you wanna ask, I'm just trying to get to the facts.
Sure. Janelle, was the information that I provided to you last week, emailed to each of the board members prior to
I
the
didn't get
meeting?
all the exhibits, I don't think, in my packet. I got some of the stuff, but I went through to look for exhibits 1 through 12, and I didn't see that they were clearly delineated. I've been on a plane for the last 2 days, and I've been reading on the plane. I didn't see all that information.
I submitted this whole packet right here
Okay,
for each year review in advance. We made sure that we did that way before this, because that's always a concern, is to make
Yeah, I
sure
would
that you're
agree.
fully informed.
The subcommittee had access to that and used that when we made our decision to forward.
but I didn't, and I'm being asked to vote on it.
Yeah.
And I'm
it
not
was-
disagreeing, I'm just trying to figure out where we're standing. This. I'm not.
To the committee.
Okay,
But if you're asking me to vote, I'm taking a personal responsibility in this, and you're asking me to make a decision. I'm not pro or against anything. I'm just trying to figure out the process, so I know what I have in front of me, so I can make an intelligent decision.
okay.
That's what I'm,
So the other clarification that I want to offer is the reason that we have these two processes, the appeals process and the variance process, two different purposes.
yes,
The appeals process is to determine whether or not environmental health has interpreted and applied the rules correctly.
okay,
And if we have, then you should deny the appeal. And a little more clarification is that the engineer that's involved in this project has clearly stated she has no dispute that we have interpreted and applied the rules correctly.
and how did that come out to an affidavit or what?
She told me personally and through emails that were submitted in this package.
Does she agree with that?
Well, you can ask her when she stands
So
up,
we have a counter opinion on this, perhaps, maybe.
you know, and again, keep in mind,
No, I-
appeal is separate, variance is separate.
No, I
So
understand.
what she told me is that they didn't wanna, waste time going through the appeal, they just wanted to get to the variance. And I said, we're not gonna subvert the process, because then if things don't turn out favorably for whoever, then we're subjected to litigation, so we're gonna follow the process, every single time exactly the same.
So litigation,
The applicant,
okay, so similar to that, okay. So one of the things that the information I did get is that in denying or agreeing for the denial, that one of the conditions is that they go through another ground water monitoring season next year, is that correct?
that's what the variance is for.
Oh, so the variance would address that, so,
Mhm.
but it
Yes.
says in here, the recommendation is that it is that correct or not?
Well, we can get to that once we get to the variance. So
But so this is not absolute, these findings in here that I'm getting where I've got I guess, the applicants, whatever their synopsis and then in red, the county synopsis.
that's our
So
response.
those are not absolute?
I guess I'm not, can we focus on the appeal?
Well, this is the appeal.
That's the variance.
That is the variance. At this point, we're just.
Okay, so,
looking at the-
okay, that's where I'm confused, because you're saying it's both, it's an appeal and a variance.
Well,
That's
Yeah.
what I read in your thing. right?
yes, yeah, and
So
earlier.
you're saying this is a variance?
Yes, earlier, if you recall, I said in reference to the incinerator system, in the past, what we've done is coupled the appeal and the variance because they were in a hurry to get this all
Okay, I
done.
understand that.
And, we're not gonna do that anymore.
So what we're saying in this particular case, are we voting on a variance or on an appeal?
First, we're trying to do the appeal first. And then if
Okay,
you
but-
guys, if it can move past the appeal,
Okay,
then we
so-
can go to the
So this
variance.
is the appeal, not the variance?
Correct. This
That's
is
what
the
I called for a motion for.
For the appeal.
Appeal.
It's the same information.
That's where I'm confused, so this.
They asked to have it together.
Okay, but
and so
that's where this is messed up, this is messy, because how do you clearly delineate between which document is which then? And so am I voting on a variance, or you're saying an appeal, they're saying a variance, and I don't really
No.
know.
It's
So
I
an
really
appeal.
don't know what I've been
The
voting on
appeal, so
today.
the appeal is right now, and all the appeal is that
Okay.
if our people, like Jim had said, if our people had followed what they were supposed to for that.
Okay,
And then if
Okay.
it gets approved, or they uphold my denial, then we can move to the variance.
okay.
This is where it gets messy, and that's why Jim said we're not gonna do
Okay,
this
but that's what I'm
anymore.
saying, if this is the appeal and the variance, you've already denied both.
No, this is the appeal, and then the variance will be a separate issue.
No, you just said it was the same issue, this is the same document, right?
If I could, on page 4,
Yeah,
where it's in red, it's clearly titled Environmental Health Findings for Torping Variance. So that information
okay,
is what we're gonna be evaluating after.
so then
the
Jim,
appeal.
then we're just talking about appeal, not appeal and variance.
Yes,
At this
deal with the appeal first.
Okay,
Then once
that's all
that's
I'm
done-
trying to get at, I just wanna make sure that we don't have, cause I was reading it both ways. And I understand what you're saying, Rod, go ahead.
I think in the future, it should be two separate items.
Yeah, it should be.
Absolutely, and that's.
That's where it can be confusing, because if you read it, it looks
You
like we're
don't know.
voting on one vote,
Right,
so maybe two separate.
yep, we can do that.
And it's
Would make it
confusing from the
easier.
standpoint, it looks like there's a conclusion based on this that's not favorable to the applicant.
I think
That's what-
once you understand the process, that there are two separate things, and that's why I explained,
Yes,
this is the purpose for the appeal. It seems a little redundant to supply all this information for the appeal, and then again, supply it all again for the variance. But I understand the confusion, hence my comment earlier that we're gonna parse them out.
good.
And, the problem with that is that typically the applicant wants stuff done yesterday.
Of course they do everything.
And, so if we do it 1 month, the appeal, the next month, the variance, we hear screaming and yelling in our office that this is way too slow.
Or
And you guys are hindering our process, and so, as long as, you know, you guys are okay with that, I can shoulder that burden, no problem.
Okay, I just wanna clearly define what I'm looking at, you're saying is the appeal.
Right.
That's
Okay.
what I was trying to get at.
Okay.
And I think Pam's way of solving this in the future is really just have two action items. We can still do it on the same day. I don't have
Oh,
a
you can do it
problem
on the same
going
day,
through
but
all
we
the
talked about it.
Separator.
Right, but just separate it for administrative purposes. I think that we can, then we're done.
Fortunately, I've been involved in this enough that I understood that.
Right.
You know, and you haven't been here, and we've probably gone through this several times. So I understood exactly what we're doing when we came up with this process. Jim's the one who came up streamlining this, quite honestly. It was convoluted and had all sorts of sideways things in it. He actually put it in order to make it more understandable to both the applicant and to this board. So those discussions were held, and unfortunately, if that probably should have been separate items on their agenda items, there's no doubt, with the misunderstanding of this, but it is what it is at this point, so I'd like to move forward to action on the denial of the appeal by the health officer.
So the denial was for the March 5th septic application? Is that
Yes,
correct?
yes,
And you denied that,
yes.
and they are appealing for that denial.
It was appealed then to the health officer next, that's the next step. And the health officer denied the appeal, and then the next step is for them to appeal to the Board of Health. And then, so here's where, it really is a waste of time if it comes to you and you guys uphold the appeal and say, yeah, environmental health didn't do what they were supposed to do, they misinterpreted the rules, you should approve that septic system. That septic application, boom, they don't need a variance, it's done. You know, so then we go back to the drawing board and reevaluate it. You know, so that's why I don't really wanna do them both at the same time, because they could be paying $600 for a variance application and all that stuff, go through all that work. And it's not even necessary. If we screwed it up and you guys determine that, the appeal comes to you and you say, no, we agree with the applicant, done deal, they get the system. You know, so, again, that's why we have to follow the process.
I have one more question. Is there a difference between should or could in your department?
Specifically,
Like we now know that DEQ says that on the one rule, 48-inch rule, there are exceptions to that, right? As long as we meet those other levels. So could it be denied? Should it be denied, or could it be approved based upon that information if you're in your department? Because there is a difference between should or could. They're kind of, you know,
right, I think when I share that,
because I don't think you guys did anything malicious or any of that stuff, don't misunderstand me, but could you interpret it? Or when you're saying should, what does that mean? What do you should refer to the statute, to the rule, or what is it? What are we referring to?
yeah, I think once I share that Herbert information with you,
Okay.
it'll offer some insight.
Clarification.
Because as you look at those 11 criteria, there are some things that are, I think, commonly misconstrued.
Okay, that's what, good, okay, so perfect.
Somebody make a motion, please.
I will make a motion to, deny.
Second.
Okay, the motion's been made and second, discussion.
So if we agree to deny,
Deny the
then
appeal.
it goes to variance.
Yes,
Yes. And then it comes back before us.
It's coming right now.
it's coming today, back to us.
You mean after we get done with this?
Yeah.
Okay. So
This is his process.
I want to speak on this.
Yeah, and
And then
then
we don't have an opportunity.
if we did not.
This is process.
Denying the appeal,
We're just denying the appeal.
appeal,
So we're upholding what our health officer has
not the variance.
has said.
I believe
I don't get.
Okay, I understand.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. May I have a roll call, please?
Artist,
Yes,
Don,
Yes.
Grant,
Yes,
Jim,
Yes.
Mike.
Yes.
Pam,
Yes.
Rod,
Yes.
Toby.
Yes. Okay, motion to deny the appeal by the health officer is granted.
Okay,
Okay, now we can move to stage two.
Right.
And at that point, I think we should start with you, Jim, and then we'll get to the applicant side of the argument or the variance, please.
Yeah.
1 minute, Jim, we're just gonna hold 1 minute. I'll allow you.
Just one question. I would like an opportunity to speak about the 2002 application before we talk about the 24
If
application.
you can include that in your presentation.
Okay,
Is that okay?
that's fine. I just
You'll
want
be
to,
able to put all the information you wish out to the board, including 2022.
22.
Yes.
And then would that permit in its authority ever be able to be considered?
Okay, so
Or is that,
those are questions you can put before us,
okay, thank you.
and then we
I
can
just-
make that determination.
Thank you.
Okay, Jim,
Yes, sir. So with the documents that were provided, essentially, the variance is to the requirement to groundwater monitor. And, you know, one of the things that I wanna clarify is that, Mr. Trino brought up that, the design report, that was issued in April of 2022. Something to keep in mind, one, it was a different environmental health manager than it wasn't me. Secondarily, as you look through the regulations, a design report does not constitute a septic permit. So, until the septic permit is issued, there are steps that are occurring throughout that process. The regulations clearly state that, you shouldn't be constructing anything, septic wise or any of that, without a permit. The groundwater monitoring regulations and policy are clearly written, provided to folks. You're dealing with an experienced engineer, the applicant, at least at that time, and his brother, who's a very experienced septic installer in the Martin City area that should have been very familiar with high groundwater issues. There was communication, again, if you did not get all this stuff, I guess my apologies, but, it should have been submitted to you for your review. The subcommittee had it. They came to a finding, last month. We were supposed to bring this to you last month at the request of the engineer. It got pushed back to this month. I guess, based on the rules, it says that if groundwater or high groundwater is observed, or any evidence of that, shallower than 7 feet, that groundwater monitoring is required. And, they did groundwater monitoring, but they didn't register that with us, so we can't consider it official groundwater monitoring. We didn't have the opportunity to go out and spot check those. The groundwater seepage that Fred Wolkers saw was, like 35 to 40 inches, which is, way shallower than 7 feet. I think that's the point at hand is the variance, is asking you guys to set aside the rule that they're required to groundwater monitor. And, there are other aspects to this whole situation. When you look at the findings, and one of the things that I did after, Mr. Barnhart's comment about if you haven't been to the site and taken a look at it, I would recommend that you would. He said that in the subcommittee meeting. I did. I went up there and took some photos, and, Janelle can pull those up. And, you can see, here's the dwelling that's built. No septic system has been approved. They're hooked up presumably to the existing system that supposedly was inadequate and failing with the RV. That's a violation to the septic rules. They shouldn't be doing that. As recent as, 2 weeks ago, I was up there on another complaint in that area, drove by. There were two gentlemen that were working on the residence. I think they were putting handrails on the decking on the second story deck. After I sent the email to the engineer stating all construction should cease. You know, so, again, that's kind of a brief summation of where we're at with this. All we're asking is that they groundwater monitor this next season. And, so that way we know exactly, where we're at as far as measurements go. And, if they fail, if, it's high groundwater there, they can bring a variance to you and ask, for you guys to set that aside. We look at the 11 criteria and see if they satisfy those, and if so, grant the variance. But here today, it's, regarding the groundwater monitoring, so.
Okay, any questions at this time for Jim before we move to the applicant?
Jim, when you do groundwater monitoring, who actually generally does the monitoring to determine if there's water in there or not?
Sure.
Does the owner do that, or do you guys do that?
Both. Yeah, so typically the way it works is, not to get off on a tangent, but the regulations state that the person doing the groundwater monitoring has to be a qualified site evaluator. And they list out who that is. Well, one of the things, it's engineers, sanitarians, hydrologists, you know, professional people. One of the things, and this has been in place before I came here, is they've allowed the homeowner to do the weekly monitoring. And in some cases, it's problematic. They don't measure right, they don't construct the pipes right, the pipes aren't put in the right place. You know, fortunately, when they hire professional people, more times than not, it's done correctly. But kind of to safeguard against, you know, erroneous measurements and results, we then monthly go out and do spot checks on those. And one of the things that I've done is where, myself included, used to go out and do that monitoring. Well, I don't meet that criteria. We have a technician in our office that doesn't meet that criteria. So now we've relegated it just to sanitarians, because they meet that criteria to ward off any kind of criticism on it. Well, if we held fast to that rule, that means that the homeowners and applicants can't do it either. Can you imagine the backlog that we would have, because it would only be engineers and consultants and, you know, all of that stuff. So we're gonna have to address that somewhere in the future. But I guess a long story to, a long answer to probably, you know, your question here.
And the second question I have is, there's some issue here that seemed to me in reading it, as far as the seepage that was occurring was near the old drain field. And there's a problem of saturation that may have skewed the result. But the unapproved sites that were groundwater monitored, that were put there that you guys didn't know about, which were apparently okay. Is that where the new drain field's going, or I mean, what's the relationship of those holes to the seepage that was noted before?
Right, so I'll let the engineer speak to that stuff. You know, again, initially it was our understanding that that drain field had been abandoned. So it was a little puzzling to me why there would be consistent seepage coming out, but now we know why. You know, the RV is hooked up to it. So it's been in continual use. Again, not supposed to be. So.
Okay, any further questions for Jim?
So had the sanitarian, when they arrived in 2024, when Mr. Walters got there, agreed with the previous assessment of no water above within that 7 feet. But everything had just moved forward and septic system installed and no problem.
Yeah, so, there have been some changes in the way that we do business in environmental health. And that's why I felt compelled to point out that I wasn't the environmental health manager there. A number of things to consider and, you know, at that point, Crystal Kyle was the one that did the design report, and Fred were really our only two sanitarians that were doing field work. Wendy Jacobs was here, but she does primarily subdivision stuff. They were both very, very new and unfortunately didn't receive adequate training. So they were doing the very best they could do to try and get through the volume of work they had. And, you know, to me, it seems a little strange when you look at the design report and it says that, you know, no groundwater observed, but the soil is saturated, and then you suggest a sand. You know, some conflicting information there as far as I'm concerned. So, I would say kudos to Fred to go back out there and reevaluate and make sure, in light of some of the things that we've learned over the last 2.5 years, to make sure that it was done properly. So,
Any further questions? All right, seeing none, thank you, Jim. Now we'll move to the proponent, please.
Hi, my name is Mikkel Siemens. I am a professionally licensed engineer in the state of Montana. I was hired by Tom and Scott Torpin to assist in doing a sand mound design specifically related to the 2022 site evaluation by Crystal Keel from the Environmental Health. In lieu of our last meeting, I showed up at that meeting without the findings of facts. And I've had an opportunity to review that information and process through some of what the statements of records were made. And that is why I was trying to interject some comments prior, but I would like to talk about the 2022 application first and foremost. I know that the 2022 application was submitted on behalf of regulations that are not the current regulations today. And I do believe that there is a strong basis for us to go back to the regulations at the time my client submitted that application and that site review was done. I authored up some findings of facts contrary that may be presented later on, and I have all this documentation for you guys to see the change in regulations that has occurred since 2022 to the current regulations today. But specifically, the regulation that has changed that directly impacts my client is related to the period for which a site review remains valid. And this is extensively problematic in my mind. Not only on this specific project, but across the county. Because these are public records that we have people considering purchasing property in which they're gonna rely upon a site review that was been presented and approved to the county, whether permanently or temporarily, make a purchase of a property, and then find out that information is no longer valid and additional requirements are burdened. And perhaps they may or may not, after they own the parcel, then have the ability to develop it. So the regulation I'm speaking to in regards to the site evaluation indicates something more like there is no expiration, the 12 months is not communicated. And I can also provide you today, I have in my briefcase, a copy of my invoice of when I started this project. I started this project within that 1 year review period, if you do find that I was supposed to have something to the county within that time period. The Torpins had reached out to me, they had hired me, I had began to do base map information. If we had been notified that the site review was going to expire, I would have gladly given them some progressive information along the permitting path that would have substantiated that we had not abandoned the original application. I remember specifically going to the property myself in May, and again, all of the dates are detailed on my invoices with specific work being completed in regards to the first application. We did finally submit in March, and then we did have some correct communication or collaboration with Fred asking for another site review. I also wanna say, like, I've never done this process, and it's never my heart to have to go to this length, and I don't really know the process very well, so I apologize for my newness to it all. But, I can tell you that if there is a request by the environmental health, it is always my primary goal to provide credible information for you guys to consider, or the department to consider in relationship to projects. It has never been an intent of mine, nor my client, to indicate for the board, environmental health, that we had ever abandoned that site, that drain field. We had a valid permit. And then I also did review the regulations too, that say there is no requirement for us to abandon that permit while pursuing a replacement. A replacement sanitation is the appropriate application. This was a comment of substantial discussion in the prior meeting. And I also went back and referenced in my findings for you where that information does say that the correct categorization is not replacement. Although the house is being replaced with from a mobile home to a house, it is in the same sentence, use the word replace. And so, again, it's not new construction, it had a valid permit, and we're only trying to finalize something that was started in 2022. I was not present when the test pit was excavated. I was out on another site to visit myself. My employee, Kyle Hans, was present. And so I would really appreciate it if he could describe to you the exact circumstances of the test pit information. And then, but before I do that, if there is any questions in relationship to what I've talked about right now, I will open that up. Before Kyle talks about the excavation of the test pit and provide some more details about where that was in relationship to the existing drain field.
I have one, and that's you're interposing, an application and a permit.
Oh.
You did not have a permit, what you
Correct.
had was
We
an
had it.
application from 2022.
I apologize.
I just
Thank
wanna
you.
make sure that that is clear to
Yes,
everybody here.
Yeah, and indeed, when I was doing the design and I brought the communication today, I had to email the county to get a copy of the site evaluation. And it was only at that point in I think it was late February, that I found out that our site evaluation had expired. All of that being said, like, nobody had a clue that I was submitting on a expired site application. So. Kyle, would you like to talk about your test pit?
Hi, Kyle Hans, familiar with Core Water, never done this either, so excuse me if I'm maybe don't seem all there. Yeah, April 18th, I met Fred and Scott Torpin at the site, and we started our excavation of the test pit. Everything went as planned, didn't see anything abnormal. After about 6 feet excavation, Fred noticed a small seep on the south side of the test pit, and I'll get into the direction of the test pits and why that's important here in a little bit. But after the seep was noticed, we took a closer look, identified the range for which that seep had occurred. And at that point, the tone of conversation turned to denial of application and not much direction, therefore, of what to do next. I suggested we install a perf pipe, continue excavation of the test pit, and to finish the description. And throughout the final, excavation of the test pit 8 feet down, soils continued to become drier, all the way down to the 8 foot mark. I don't know if we have a lot layout that we can view up here.
Keep on going.
One that we had submitted on for like where our proposed drain field is and the test pit locations.
What's that page one?
I think, but
Page 19.
But
Or is it-
And I have copies as well.
It's not six. It's in the core one, but I think
Well, they're gonna need it because we supplemented the application after I submitted the original sanitation design, and they don't have the location of the 3 test pits, so I'll have to use our copies.
so, your point being that, you wanted that?
Yes, this will be a good
So where those
location.
test holes were done.
Okay, should I point to a specific screen up there maybe?
Sure. Or right, you're walking by one, how about that one, everybody can see that. Right above your head, there you go.
So. Crystal's test pit was approximately right here, which is, this is our old submittal for the drain field. There, the existing one, I believe, is right here somewhere,
No, on the north boundary,
right here.
we'll clarify it for you guys later.
Her test pit was close to the end of that drain field, which is in her description. She said that she's described some wet soils in that same range that I had seen. When we dug ours a little bit further to the south. During our excavation, on the south side of the test pit is where the seeps had occurred. There was no seeps on the north side of that test pit, no water entering into that hole. And as we dug further down, the moisture content of soil dropped off and it just became normal throughout that normal site condition. The new test pit that was dug after the fact was even further north and was described as completely dry, so. That is my description of the test pit. I do have copies if people have any questions. I also have photos of the soils that I can leave for you guys as well. Is there any
Anybody
questions?
require that? Sport?
So,
No.
I'm gonna ask a question.
Yeah,
So your point is that this seepage was not groundwater? Is that
it
the
was,
point of,
my observation was, it was coming from a source to the south of that test pit.
Did that answer your question, Mark?
yes?
I have a question and it would be for, Fred Wolkers. Fred, can I ask you a question, please? Come on down. When that test hole was dug, this last one that we're talking about that showed a seep, and then the other two, did you notice any modeling in the soil? I mean, the description that I just received said that there was none when we got to an area of a seep. And that from that point down, there was no indication of modeling from high groundwater in the past. What was your observation?
From what I recall, there wasn't distinct modeling. And I would say Kyle's description of the test hole was accurate to what I remember seeing too. Again, modeling, it shows differently in different soils. The soils there are, a combination of clays and, some gravels, things of that nature, but, when I'm looking at soils, and I don't proclaim to be like an expert at everything, but you might see a distinct line of modeling, you might not see a distinct line of modeling. Sometimes you see modeling and doesn't mean that there is high groundwater there every year. It could be what I was always taught could be what's called relic, meaning old, really old, okay? So, I don't recall, to answer your question, seeing modeling, very distinct modeling, but again, the the thing that gave me pause, I guess, on all this, hence how it's progressed, is that the saturated soils. Again, I won't stand here and say that they're right, they're wrong, I'm right or wrong, other than I know I don't, how do I prove and know that it's not groundwater? You know, that what they're stating, but how do I prove that? How do I know that as a person reviewing it, that it truly is just the old soils or whatever, and I was merely falling back to what I know procedurally and on the rules. If you see potential signs of groundwater, and I would say water seeping into a test hole and saturated soils, modeling or no modeling, to me, just gives me pause to say, well, how do we be safe? How do we know? What does the state require when they don't know? They require groundwater monitoring. So as to say, because, you know, in my learning process is what takes precedent, what I see in the ground or groundwater results? And for a while there, I was thinking, well, what I see in the ground is better. Well, the state says if you see something above 7 feet, you should monitor. Why do they do that? Well, it's because obviously they think groundwater monitoring in some regard gives us a more accurate read about what happens there during the high groundwater season. So again, Kyle did a great job describing the test hole. I wouldn't do any of that. And so I got carried away with the answer there, but, yeah.
So in your professional opinion, that needs to be, groundwater because of what you observed? You need to have groundwater monitoring from, say, March 15th?
Again, based on my knowledge of the rules and what I saw, that yes, I would say it should be, hence the.
Just looking at what you saw. Okay, thank you, Fred. Anyone else have any questions for Mr. Walters? No, thank you. Oh,
Yeah.
Doc?
So if you're at a site and you see something like that, do you then make a recommendation to the people at the same time? I'm trying to understand why they dug additional holes without you guys being notified.
Sure, yeah, and Kyle kind of mentioned it, you know, at the time, it may have seemed that there wasn't a lot of guidance on what do we do next. I mean, Kyle certainly got was a suggestion, hey, let's put a pipe in. We had discussion right then and there. We were already in the midst of our groundwater season in Martin City. We have other monitoring going on, and we know roughly from there, we've already seen groundwater start to rise and start to fall in that general area. So I had said, hey, you can put a pipe in, what I had some concerns that there might have already been a peak measurement and it had gone down. And again, what I'll say to answer your question is, I've found that there's a lot of layers to this stuff and complexities, and I don't always have all the answers right on the spot. I mean, I was puzzled as Kyle was, so I was honestly careful not to give exact guidance then and there, because I needed to kind of go back and look at things and consider things. And that didn't happen immediately because of the amount of volume of work we have to do. But to Kyle's point, so sometimes you can make a determination right then and there, and we will. But there's times where there's a lot of things at play, and I'll be frank with you, I'm not gonna make a decision there if I don't really. Like you don't have all the information and facts, so, there's a lot of, well, maybe that is, maybe that's not. So that, to answer your question, sometimes yes, sometimes no.
I have a question too, I wanna bring up.
Can I finish answering this? Another thing is that's one of the things we've started doing with groundwater monitoring is, we used to kind of say, if you don't start it by this point, you can't do it. But to Jim's credit, we've started to move away from that for the purpose of maybe it doesn't peak early. So to give people the option that wasn't directly advised at that moment, because I need to go evaluate. Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
That's fine, but so you install systems, is that?
I personally do not install systems.
Okay,
It's our
but
sanitary.
he's sanitary, okay. So when you have an engineer though that has a background who says that there was no seepage, right? Then you then can overrule that by what you noticed in the hole.
I mean, again, I think obviously engineers are professionals too, but it's a working relationship, it's a discussion, it's not that Well, I didn't see it, so I'm gonna say no. I mean, that's certainly not what happened. In this case, we take the information provided to us and we evaluate. If
No,
we
I-
feel it's accurate and representative, then, and I would say in many cases, we try to defer and acknowledge their professional opinions, but we too are also licensed professionals to evaluate that and make a determination. And at the end of the day, if we don't feel like it's representative and we have enough information, I would rather err on the side of caution than proceed, as you've seen in some of these past cases where throw caution to the wind and move forward, and then where does that get us?
So what would be your primary concern in this situation?
Just simply that we don't know where the depth of groundwater is, so how can I sign off on a design, even if it meets everything else? How can I say that the design is designed appropriately if the depth of the groundwater is not verified? I mean, essentially, we see the seep in it, that's not groundwater. Is there any groundwater below that? Where is it? Because that affects where you design. And I know when people design sand mounds, they kind of say, well, we're just hedge our bets. And we'll just design it so high that we can avoid. Well, what if it's even higher than the seep show? What if I mean, we just want the information. I just want the information before I get approval. I mean,
Have you observed the pits that have been dug?
I observed the one test hole that Kyle dug.
And recently, how did that, what were your, what decisions did you make from that?
Well, the observations are in the denial letter. Essentially that there was water seeping in, as Kyle described, along the side of the test hole. And I think it was, again, it was in a roughly around the 35 to 40 inch range. I mean, it's higher than 48 inches. So, and certainly higher than 7 feet, which is why to me, hence the decision, that's what I saw. And every day.
Brent, I have a question for you. Before you went out and to observe this, were you aware of what Chris or Kyle had put forth?
Yeah, I can explain that a little bit in my role in it. So obviously, Mikhail's lined out what that another sanitarian had done that work. That person had left, months before, and when the file came, I picked it up. Okay, so now it's my responsibility to evaluate all the things in that application and verify that it's correct, it's accurate. And now it's me putting my name on it too. So I'm gonna make sure of that. And so when I was looking at that, I saw obviously the past work that was done, what was evaluated, and I questioned it. I didn't feel confident that that was potentially representative. And what I at that time was not saying this is totally wrong. I was saying, I don't think we gathered enough information to verify that even the sand mound is feasible. Okay, and it was out of an abundance of caution to not just blaze forward and permit a system only to find out that groundwater is too shallow. Because if you go right down the road, down the block, guess where we're at? Okay, so, I apologize if I'm getting a little bit heated here. I'm just trying to be very clear about where we're coming at. That I was aware of what, and that's exactly why this all transpired. I made a decision, as Jim said, we are subscribing to the rules now a little differently, I would say better, and reading things differently. And that was kind of why I paused and looked at it a little closer, just to gather the information, which is hence, again, we're not saying no, we're saying we need the information to make an informed decision.
Thank you, Brent.
I have,
Oh, excuse me.
oh, Pam.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I just have some observations, not really questions, but more observations as I read through this and I'm thinking about all this. And I listened to the testimony today and I looked at your findings, and finding 10 talks, well, first of all, the letter itself talks about, you actually did do some, maybe not your procedural monitoring, but there was some monitoring done per se, because there was vegetables dug, you noticed some seepage. I mean, there was some, maybe not the original or what we normally do, but there was some monitoring kind of done. Could you say that?
I wouldn't say that in the sense that, observing a test hole,
Right.
what you see in the ground, you're getting
Right.
you're evaluating a soil test hole, but the monitoring is really the seasonal start to finish, getting the curve.
Right.
So in that sense, no, we didn't.
So I went to alternative 10, which says no alternatives comply with the requirements as reasonably feasible. And it says in here that a full season of groundwater may indicate that the system would comply with our regulations and an engineered system might require. Moreover, in order to appeal for a variance in depth groundwater, there must be a valid determined peak measurement and so on. So the valid, you have to have the valid measurement that. Without the monitoring, this depth cannot be determined, it cannot be proven that an alternative exists. And then you go on to number 11, which talks about the evidence-based requested for the minimum needed.
Yeah.
It says, as high groundwater is not extraordinarily conditioned, see above, an extraordinary condition, and the minimum requirements is to monitor any site that may have groundwater above 7 to ground surface. The variance would potentially be more than the minimum required to address the depth to groundwater. So what they're proposing is actually more than the minimum that could possibly be required. We're kind of all guessing.
Yeah.
And then without groundwater monitoring and a valid peak depth, there's no way to validate the engineer's assumed groundwater depth and or determine whether the proposed system complies with the minimum requirements. But they're saying they're gonna go over and above the minimum requirements just so they can get the system going. Am I getting that right? That's what I'm reading.
Yeah, I mean, again, to clarify, essentially what those 2 points are, they're kind of opposite, but they're saying the same thing, which is if we do not know an actual depth that has been vetted through the process that is in place to verify those depths, AKA groundwater monitoring, how can we determine that it's not more than the minimum or less than the minimum? And the idea here is honestly to be in the favor of the client.
They may not need a set.
They might not need it.
No, they may not, but they're proposing to do over and above.
Potentially, but potentially not, because if they don't have the right depth to groundwater, again, we're in the same boat, we're always in that.
But even if it is above the 48 inches, it looks like under the rule that we can make a variance according to the rules, according to DEQ anyway, that we can make an exception to that, so long as those other
And again,
requirements are met,
Again,
right?
the variance here, I guess, is to not have to monitor and gather that data
But the monitor is
versus
ridiculous.
having a depth and saying, we want to design to that.
I know, but what we're really talking about in some degree is to find out where that is, so it's not 48 inches, right?
Can I ask a question of you, Fred?
Sure.
So you said that, it had peaked in that area. The groundwater in that area in Martin City had peaked. When did it peak?
I can't recall, obviously, it was whenever we were out there on that test walk.
In April?
The date, but it was, and let me be clear about is that I knew from other monitoring sites in the area that we had seen groundwater start to come up and had seen measurements start to
Did it
come
start to
down.
drop?
I didn't say it was the peak, but that we might have experienced a peak.
A peak. So if it was in April, and we dug these test holes in April, and what would have been the highest groundwater in that area? Do you know that?
I don't, although I know, I can't say I don't have the information from
Okay,
others, honestly.
okay.
Yeah.
Groundwater all over that area is different.
It is.
Varies in the different areas, just like we're talking about Herbert.
Yep.
And this is on the side of it, on the hill, with a flat spot, which at one point, I guess, was a road. So it's different. I mean, you can't say because he saw something happening over here, you can't compare it.
Right.
The only thing you can compare is possibly the timeframe. I just want to clarify that.
Right,
Because it's
yeah,
all
yeah,
over the place.
yeah, it's all over,
It's hard to
yeah.
say.
No, because we're just speculating without a measurement, without some sort of, we're just making up stuff, okay?
Sorry, maybe if I could offer this, in light of the fact that, the engineer stated she has information that wasn't provided to us. Ultimately, all of that information is supposed to be provided to us in the variance packet. I would suggest you table this until we get all that information and we have the opportunity to evaluate it and her responses to the findings. Otherwise, that's just.
I understand what you're saying, Jim, but I think an opportunity, what we have to look at is we have to look at the findings of fact. That pertains to everything we do. Now, you have to look at that when you're giving a variance and whatever you're doing. The findings of fact is what you have to base your decision on. If those findings of fact, if we can look at the findings of fact from your department, and they can present something that disputes any portion of those, this group can grant the variance based on that proposal. So I'm not sure whether, I understand exactly what you're saying. I think to expedite what we're doing, I think if the presenter would come forth and specifically point out the variance or the portions of findings of fact that they dispute, I think we would have an opportunity to make a decision on this today. It's been put off a month. I think if they're prepared to dispute these findings of fact, one by one, or which ones they feel have been incorrectly determined, we can make a decision. If not, I guess that's where we're at. I'm not sure, please.
I'm gonna disagree with that. I think as a board, and some of us don't know septics that well, I think we need that information ahead of a meeting. We can't just, we could be here all afternoon with you trying to discount what we're doing and us going back and forth like a subcommittee should be doing, not the board. But if there's, so we need to make a decision. You would like a decision sooner than later, right? You don't wanna
No.
wait a month.
Can I clarify? The reason why I'm bringing this information to you now is because I wasn't given the findings of facts for the subcommittee. I wasn't given an opportunity to rebut at that time. And then, once I had the findings of facts, I could sort through and see where I agreed or disagreed.
Well,
And so it is, and if in the event that you want to fact check what I'm providing you today, and I have a lot more facts for you, I think that's the best decision, because I want you guys to make a decision you can stand on. But I really wanted you guys to understand that there was an existing on-site sanitation system on this property. There's no requirement by the rule for us to abandon it. We've been asked to groundwater monitor, and what relevance does that really have when we actually are doing a replacement sanitation system that was issued a valid permit, had a valid site evaluation from 2022, and I was simply providing the application to finalize the process. So that, in my mind, is the first and foremost.
But that's not what we're discussing here.
But
All we're discussing
applications
is that,
expire.
right,
Yeah.
the variance isn't for the application expiring. The variance is for the groundwater monitoring. That's the only thing that they can rule on or discuss today. If there's something else, then you have to bring something else forward. But we are tied to the variance that is before them right now. There's not the other discussion of this, the 2022 or anything like that. I get that you wanna plead your case, but that's not what's before the board right now. So we can table it. And if you wanna bring something else forward, then that's a different item. But we can't be talking about this and this and this and this.
Right,
We're right here.
I agree with that, unfortunately. In my mind, because of my experience of putting these things in the ground in like for 50 years, and a bunch of them up in Martin City, I've already made my mind up. I believe that it's not a problem. I believe that the findings that were there, plus the fact that a evaluation from 2022 was rendered, and the change in that, I think that the person that's bringing this forward has a lot of valid points. But I know that a whole bunch of members on this board want to have all the information before they can make this decision. So what I would say is we could move towards table. I would recommend that the motion be made to table. We'll find out if people want to table this, or we want to go forward today.
I feel like I've heard enough, and I wouldn't mind moving forward today, because I've read a lot, I've read through it, I've listened to what's been said. I feel like, in my mind, I understand the groundwater monitoring, we wanna follow our policies, and I think our environmental health does a great job, and don't get me wrong, I think that's great that we follow our policies and everything. I in my mind, I feel like that's kind of already been done and it's a replacement and all the other stuff that I've seen. And the fact that they're gonna, even if we groundwater monitor next year, I think we're gonna still look at a sand mountain, maybe not, but they're going over and above what we already require. So I would move forward with the variance myself. That's just me.
And I would.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I would.
I don't know how the board feels. I just feel like this has been, I talked about a lot. It's like, I mean, there's been a lot of work put into it and that's a good thing. I'm not saying that our environmental health did anything wrong. I think they follow their rules. But I think we're gonna end up in the same spot, and that's why I would support the variance today, because I don't think there's gonna be any difference whether we do groundwater monitoring or not, cause in 2022, there was some stuff going on, and then in April of this year, April this year, Fred was out there and saw some water, so I think we really kind of know where the water is on this property, and there was a septic system there already, so it's actually a replacement, so I don't know why they can't have their septic, it's kind of, I guess that's where I'm leaning, they already have one, really. They're just fixing it up.
So is there, a feeling that we should move forward with this?
How about if I just make a
Tabling is
motion
not-
to
is
approve the
something we should
variance
not
and see
do.
where it goes? Yeah.
And make a motion.
Are you approving the variance to, they have to have a sound ban?
Yeah,
Okay, then you need to put that in there as well.
to the higher level of,
Remember that, please remember this, and you know this very well, you have to find one of these findings of fact to be erroneous. Otherwise, we're just gonna say that we do
Well, I
not
went
agree
through the
with the
one.
findings of fact for this reason. You have to have a reason not to agree.
well, I
So if we
went
can
through
do
that, I went through that,
okay,
because I said I didn't
in that,
necessarily agree.
in section 10,
Section 10 and section 11 talk about a full season of monitoring, which I kind of feel like they already kind of know what's going on there for that finding. Section 11 talks about that they're gonna do something even more, more than we're requiring. So for me, that's my reasoning,
so if you move to grant this variance,
yes.
you would point out that, section
Yes, on the
10
record.
and 11
Yeah.
Are erroneous in the report, and to move ahead with the granting the variance. Is that kind of where you're coming from?
I guess that's right, yeah.
Okay.
It's on the record what I said, so you can insert that into whatever.
So,
Insert it in.
and so at this point, can we move forward with a motion?
Did I do a motion? I thought I did.
Did you do a motion to grant the variance?
Yeah, she did.
Okay, so we have a
Did we
motion
get a
on the
second?
table.
Did we get a second?
I second.
You second?
Okay, have a motion on the table to grant the variance due to 10 and 11.
Yeah.
And the findings of fact being erroneous.
And what I said, and all my,
Sure, it's all on there, absolutely. Okay, so at this time, that being said, can I have a roll call, please?
Artis,
Yes.
Don,
Yes.
Grant,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Mike.
Yes.
Pam,
yes,
Rod,
Yes.
Toby.
Yes.
All right, the variance has been granted. Thank you, and, you know, I have every
But
respect
we
for
have
our
to, we do,
environmental health
we
committee.
do have to make provisions in there that they have to put in a sand mound.
I think I added that.
I think
We
that
did
was in
have
it.
that.
Yeah, I added it to my motion. When you asked me that, I added it to the motion, that it has to be a sand mountain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Over and above.
But I have every confidence in our environmental health group. They do fantastic work, and I certainly didn't need to do anything they've done. They've done their job, and we appreciate, and they're so easy to work with. I think this was an outlier that we used common sense on and came to the correct decision. So, Mr. Torpin?
Yeah, as a property owner, I'm gonna tell you, I installed septic systems with my brother for 3 years, and we work with Fred a lot, and I have a lot of respect for Fred, so. And we have a little bit of difference on this one, I actually had some photos which would have cleared this up a little bit better, because we didn't realize at the time when we dug the test hole where the end of our existing system is. So I found the tank accidentally digging, And I marked it out, and then there's a separate tank that was also there, and then I kind of figured out where I thought the lines are gonna be, and they do come right up to that test hole. So I really think you guys made the right decision here. That water that's in that hole is from the existing system. And my brother, the first time he dug the hole, he accidentally touched that, the laterals, and water spewed out of it. And I can't even tell you why there's water in there. So it's the right decision.
Well, I think it was a failed system.
I think you're right, cause I pulled the top off and it's plumb full of water still. Matter of fact, both those tanks that are sitting there are plumb full, so that'll be the first thing we do is drain those tanks and crush them and put in a new one.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My apologies, board, I have to get to Helena.
Oh, have a safe trip.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you, board. I think you did good work. The questions were asked, the answers we received. All right, moving on. Next is, animal shelter report.
Good afternoon, Austin's here. Same report you see every month, nothing outliers as far as the numbers go there. 40 adoptions last month, which we've been holding steady with, so pretty good there. I'll answer any questions you have on the numbers, but I did want to mention two other quick things. Our nonprofit partner just installed $60,000 worth of artificial turf. It is installed, so it looks great, so that's awesome. They donated that to us, so that was good. And then also, I've been on a big mineral rights hunt. I found out we had mineral rights from 1993 that no one knew nothing about. We are finally getting close to having closure on that, so looks like we're gonna have about $60,000 that they owe us, in back pay, so good news there. Any questions on anything? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, community health.
Good afternoon, Board of Health. I'm Mackenzie Grass from Community Health. I'm gonna give immunization, home visiting, and WIC updates for you today. Starting with immunizations, you can see that our numbers for September took a big increase from last month. This is the start of our busy season, so it's cool to see those pick up. They're also well above September of last year, part in fact, or in due because we received our flu and COVID vaccine early, so we're able to start seeing that spike of fall vaccines earlier. Janelle, we go to that other, my supplemental one that I sent you, did you have it in there? One up. Yes, one up, right here, up, right there, ooh, yeah. The single one, down a little, right there. Aside from my normal Board of Health numbers reporting, I wanted to pull out a couple other things that I'm tracking currently, which are our walk-in numbers and our online scheduling. Prior to COVID, our clinic was primarily walk-in. During COVID, we went to exclusively appointments. And last September in 2023, we started offering walk-ins again, specifically on Wednesdays or our walk-ins. We also accommodate our community members as best we can on any other day. But the numbers for walk-in there are specifically for those walk-in Wednesdays. And below there, you can see our online scheduling. We started in March, so that was the first month that we started offering it, and you can see that it steadily picked up as we saw more appointments. You scroll down a little now. So the first graph looking here, these are the walk-in Wednesday numbers mapped out over the last year. So you can certainly see those ebb and flow as our season peaks. But what I thought was also interesting was to look at the percent of the whole for total appointments or total visits. And you can see that those hang right in that 15 to 25% mark as far as our populations that like to come in and walk in versus appointments. Scroll one more down. And here again, a graph looking at number of online scheduled appointments. That top graph is total scheduled appointments, with the bottom one being a percent of total visits. And you can see that those hang at that 10 to 20% mark of people that are enjoying that online scheduling option. We're hearing great feedback about it in the clinic. One of the nice things about online scheduling is, not only does it free up our front desk to get phone calls constantly, but it allows a scheduling option for people outside of regular business hours. And I don't know if any of you are like me, I think of things at, 9 PM when I lay down in bed, and it's really great to jump on and be able to schedule for something the same week. I can go back to my normal numbers, Do you guys have any questions, about any of that data that I just shared? We held our annual flu clinic at the fairgrounds this month on the 9th. Every year we hold this, it's an all staff event, so essentially every member of the health department is there and making that run for the day. We also have nursing volunteers that come help give vaccines, along with the MSU nursing students, so it's really a great community event. It's a great opportunity for our staff to practice incident command structure and response and just see how many people we can move through. During that, we saw 932 people, and about 50% of them also elected to get the COVID vaccine. So we were able to give 1,300 vaccines that day. We also had 2 outreach clinics last month and gave 77 vaccines to 55 people. We did those for the City of Kalispell employees, and then we partnered for the first time with Agency on Aging, which is just across the street, but we've never gone over there and offered immunizations on site. We set up in their activity room and saw a great turnout for that. We offered flu, COVID, and the RSV vaccine for them. Any questions on my immunization updates?
None?
Looking at home visiting, we do have a home visitor that will be leaving us next week. She's moving across the state. This means that we will now have 2 home visitor openings in that program. We are actively interviewing, and I think we'll have at least one of those positions filled very shortly with hopes of having both of them filled in the near future. In WIC, we host Masters of Dietetic intern students. We do this every year. This year we're hosting 2 this fall. We just had our first one finish up her 2-week rotation. We have another one coming in November. I just think it's great to highlight in general how our staff not only serves our community, but also serves the students that are learning to serve the community. WIC also had their biannual site monitoring from the state. This is where the state comes in and does about a 1.5 to a 2-day on-site monitoring. Not only are they looking at our facility for compliance, they're also monitoring all of our staff and sitting in on visits and making sure that all of their documentation is up to date. From that, our preliminary score was a 91% compliance, which is really excellent. That puts us at a tier 1, which is the best tier that you can be in for site review. I also thought of note, they pointed out that we were the first site monitoring they've ever done that did not have a finding, meaning errors in our risk code assignments, which is something that our dietitians have to do. Really, really hard to do that accurately the majority of the time, and they've always found findings, which is multiple errors in that area. Said that we were the very first site that they've ever visited that did not have findings for that. So huge shout out and kudos to our WIC team. And that's all I have for community health.
Questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good population health.
All right, good afternoon. And looking on starting off with the communicable disease report, just to address some of the usual or the outliers on there. We did have 5 elevated lead cases for September. 2 of those were adult cases. One was more of a hobby-related exposure. The other one, unfortunately, was kind of lost to follow-up after multiple attempts to try to contact that individual to do an investigation, just weren't able to get a hold of them. So that one's unable to be reached at this time, still for investigation. The other 3 cases were in pediatric cases. And they are new to the area. So an investigation was done to find the sources. It was really hard to nail that down, but now that they are here in a new home, hopefully at the follow-up visits for the testing, we'll hopefully see those lead levels come down nicely. So we'll keep an eye on that one. There's also a chickenpox, a varicella case that we had last month. It was a pediatric case, not quite sure where they were exposed to contract it, but, it was in a school-age kiddo and, there were some school exposures, so we did have to exclude some children just based on what's required of us by the NCAs. So we worked really closely with the school on that one and, so far still haven't received any additional cases, from that exposure, so that's good. Lastly, on the communicable disease side, I did want to give you a heads up that we are in the preliminary stages of investigating an active tuberculosis case. So I really don't have too much information to share at this point, but with the information that we do have, on the contact investigation, we have very minimal contacts and exposure, so that's good news there. So, we'll continue to work on that. And then moving over to the chronic disease injury prevention side, it's October, which is always a busy month for our cancer screening program staff. And as you see, if you came to the building, there's a mammal bus out there. So it's a very busy day for the girls down there in that program. They've scheduled at least 22 women, on that bus. So we're grateful to get those people in and work with Logan Health to collaborate to provide that service. So, it's been a good busy day down there for them. And also Wendy Hansen, one of our health promotion specialists, she's in Helena today, and she is presenting at the annual transportation safety meeting. So she's partnering with some of the other Buckle Up Montana coordinators and presenting information about traffic safety, behavior education, and awareness programs in Montana. So we're just really proud of Wendy to do that and be kind of a lead and expert within Montana on the Buckle Up program. Lastly, on the other side of population health, we've been working with Montana DPHHS and the Mountain Pacific to host a community event that's really focused on bringing together our service organization and healthcare professional partners. And that event will be on November 19th at FECC. So the goal or the name of that event is called Renew and Connect, Building Community Health Partners in Flathead County. So the goal of the event, I have to read this, is to foster opportunities for individual and organizational growth by rebuilding strong community partnerships, thereby creating a supportive and collaborative environment to increase knowledge, expand community referrals, and improve health and well-being of all Flathead County residents. So essentially, what we have found is that during COVID, after COVID, the pandemic, we have kind of lost touch with a lot of the service providers and organizations, and we just want to get kind of the group and organizations back together and share information about the programs and services that everybody has, so we can make appropriate referrals to each other and just ultimately better serve our community with our organizations that we have in Flathead Valley. So that's pretty much it that I have for updates, unless there's any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, environmental health.
Good afternoon, I'm Jim Wardensky with Environmental Health. Couple of updates. On Saturday, I was tasked with going out to a train derailment up near Essex where they had 12 rail cars out of 115 that had derailed, 11 of which tipped over on their side and spilled out the contents, which were raw soybeans. Through that process and working with our partners at the state and BNSF, we determined that those soybeans were slated for human consumption, which prompted our involvement in it. The Flathead County OES, Office of Emergency Services, reached out to the health officer. I was the one that was on call last week, so the health officer reached out to me. OES took some photos, and as time went on and we were alerted to the fact that yes, it was for human consumption, because initially we were told that maybe it was animal feed. So emails, phone calls back and forth, and I don't know, about 1 PM on Saturday, I traveled out to the site to take a look and evaluate. And, you know, it was determined that, the 11 train cars, they hold 100 tons each. So then, of course, our responsibility is determining how and where it's gonna be disposed of. The two options that, statutorily are allowed is to take it to the landfill. If the product is determined to have been contaminated. The other option is, to try and find, you know, animal feed, a location, depending on the condition of, the contaminated food. So Burlington Northern decided, to haul it to the landfill. The health officer coordinated with, Dave Prunty from Solid Waste. He gave approval for BNSF to haul it there. They brought in big vacuum trucks, vacuumed, all of that up. For the last 2+ days, have been hauling that by a side dump truck to the landfill. Once that concludes, I'll get the scale receipts from the landfill, make sure that that reconciles with, what we have, as far as the estimated, contents in the rail cars. So, you know, 110, tons of, no, yeah, well, whatever, 11 times 10. Or 11 times, yeah, 100 is a lot. Yeah, so, they had folks from Fish, Wildlife and Parks there to mitigate any kind of bear or animal involvement. I really was impressed, by their response. They allowed unabated access, for us to the site. Obviously, I didn't go trouncing around all over because it was a safety concern. But they communicated, and to my estimation, were very transparent about it. The gentleman that I was dealing with out of Topeka, Kansas, emailed me all the information that I needed. We filled out the truck wreck report and the disposal agreement. That information has been provided to DPHHS, their Food and Consumer Safety Division. And, you know, all in all, you know, a tragic situation. Fortunately, there were no injuries or fatalities, but a dangerous scenario that I think was resolved quickly. So from the mosquito standpoint, since Brock wasn't here today, I just wanted to share that months and months, maybe even over a year ago or 2 years ago now, the drone that was shot down, there was a breakdown in communication with the drone company, and they thought that we just wanted them to dispose of it. So as Brock communicated with them and said, you know, no, we wanted it repaired because we wanted to put it up for auction or whatever, additional communication happened with the insurance company. And, Brock and I talked about it and said, well, rather than having it repaired and us trying to auction it off and all that, if the insurance company will just cut us a check for the value of it, let's be done with it. So that has happened, and, the check has been routed appropriately. So, I think pretty much the dollar amount that, we paid for the stuff we got back. The, last thing I think, I wanna share is, next week, Marion Wellness, who's our newest sanitarian, will be taking her national, sanitarian exam. So fingers crossed, she'll have that behind her, and then, we can start, you know, gearing her up for some of the more technical stuff, that she's doing. She's working on the land and septic side. Then the only one that we have remaining is Kevin Robinson, and Kevin's scheduled to take his exam as well. You know, one of the things that we've done a little different with Marion is that we've seen, as we've brought new people on, where they get immersed in the workforce and all of a sudden their studies fall behind. And then it's panic mode when they have to take that exam. And it's a relatively difficult exam. So we've tried to moderate that a little bit more with Marion, where, with Graceland, who was the last one, you know, she's a brilliant young lady, and I think she weathered it okay. But, you know, most people don't work that way. So, we've pulled the reins back a little bit, and, let Marion, take more time to study and just kind of ease into, her duties there, so. And, I guess I don't have anything else to, if you have any questions for me, so.
Any questions from the board?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Kirk Zander for the Health Department. I really don't have any comments on the, in additional to the, financial, so if you have any questions on the financials that were presented.
Just one, on the AR, that's 409,000, 113,000 in August. What's the aging on that, on the 409, are we 90 days?
That's a scale, Jim, of all the way from, most of it's in 0 to 30 days.
Okay,
Just because of what, as flu season immunizations are kicking in,
okay,
that sits in that 0 to 3 day bucket.
okay,
There's probably, I would say, 35,000 that sits in the oldest bucket out there.
okay. So none of this is bad debt, then?
No, not at all. Well, always I would reserve for a portion for bad debt, but at the end of the day, most of it is in that 0 to 3 bucket right
So
now.
when we collect this, we'll bring our cash balance up.
Excuse me.
Should bring our cash balance up when we start collecting this along with our revenue.
That's correct, and we're going through our natural cycle, you know, we're building
Yes.
receivables up, and then, of course, we're expending, cash for vaccine purchases.
I saw
And
that.
then that'll drop off, and then all of a sudden, cash will start coming.
That
in.
was a 20%, 27% increase or whatever from last year or whatever on the vaccine, and the revenue was down 13%, I think.
Yeah, and that's all timing.
Okay.
It depends on when big purchases are made for the flu, and, just recently here, I mean, we put out 100,000,
Okay.
I think it was for the flu clinic. And that payment came a little earlier this year than it did last year, so it's tough to, because these are cash based.
Yeah, do you think our cash balance will drop lower than 900, than 932 or whatever it is?
I say that again.
Do you think our cash balance will drop lower than it currently is? Right now, what's our ending cash? It was 900.
Yeah, the 923 right now, so we're actually 135,000 higher than we were last year at this
Do you think
time.
it will drop lower though?
Yeah, it sure will. Yeah,
Where do you think we'll end up?
probably another 100 grand lower.
Okay,
It just depends on how things come in. And, but of course, you know, here in November and December, we'll collect 1.2 million. Big chunk of that will come in November, and then.
so we've
the rest
still
of
got
it-
plenty of runway with our.
Oh, yeah, no, we're in good shape. Yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
Anything further? Thank you. No officers report.
I'd like to take a moment to introduce James Pike. Do you want to come up and tell him about yourself? He is our new behavioral health supervisor, so that puts us at full staff with our new behavioral health division, so.
Yeah, so my name's James Pike, second week here as the behavioral health supervisor. I hope to bring in front of you lots of appeals and variances. My job here will have kind of two broad categories. The first will be overseeing our mobile crisis assistance teams, which you've heard a bit about, I think, in the last meeting. The second will be serving as a member of the Flathead County Behavioral Health Collaborative and working with them on initiatives to support behavioral health more broadly in the county. And then starting next month, I am gonna work to distill kind of the raw data that I get from our teams, that I'm starting to get from our field-based teams, and generate a report like you saw from Lisa, Mackenzie, and Jim. And kind of bring what I think are pertinent metrics about their performance for your review.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome aboard.
The shelter is getting there with the full staffing. We still have one position, but it's kind of filled right now with a temporary employee, which I'm not sure if that'll come permanent or not, so we're getting there with that. I don't think Austin's had to work 7 days a week those last couple of weeks, but Janelle might have, I don't know. Janelle's been helping out a ton out there, so really appreciate her out there. I've been working through a few HR issues. I think we're getting them taken care of. I don't really want to get into details on that. I did go to an arbitration negotiation training with Tammy Skromowski was it last week or the week before, we are gonna be going into negotiations this next year with our union, so she wanted me kind of trained up on that and to kind of hear the same things that, the unions here, so that we're kind of aware and we're all on the same page, so I did that with, was that 2 weeks ago? I'm so messed up on my days. Had the food clinic, obviously, and they kind of told you guys that. I do wanna thank Jim and Fred for, you know, for this, last variance that for the variances that come forward, the appeals that come forward, they put in an astronomical amount of time to try to make it right, and I appreciate everything that you guys do. You guys always do it very professionally, and I appreciate that. So thank you guys, and thanks environmental health staff for always, for doing that, and for making things better in environmental health, and I think that's where we're moving with environmental. In the past, I think things were done not quite how they, not necessarily
The same way.
the same way, yes, and that's what we're trying to move forward, is just so that there's a standardization, and so I appreciate them working towards that, so that we don't have confusion, so we're not constantly jumping back and forth on this way it was done, this way it's done, it's just how we're doing it forward, so I appreciate that. Keelani's been working with the MOAT group, which is the Montana Opioid Abatement Trust. She is the chair for that. So she's working with legislators and other community members in the valley to approve grants for the money that's coming through the state. So they meet once a month or whenever they get the grants. She's done a tremendous amount of job getting the kind of the procedures down and how they're going to do it and all of those things together, and putting it together for our county, which actually are for our region. So I truly appreciate everything that she's done there. So that's about it. Questions from me?
Thank you. We don't really have a committee report. We kind of covered our environmental health subcommittee meeting and what we came up with on that meeting. So I think we can move by that. Next will be board member discussion, and you can start wherever you want. Who would like to bring something up?
I just like to say if there's a phone going off, I really appreciated the duck call.
One thing I can say is, you know, Martin City is a problem area. Anytime you can fix something there and make it better, as far as septic, it's a win-win. It's just unbelievable what actually goes on there every time we make a small step, and someone wants to upgrade their property or build new there, they're making an improvement in what's there, because it's a mess. Oftentimes that CT fine, in my experience, is sewage, is seeping along certain layers in there with real problems there. So I'm glad that the board sees that we can do a little bit of good for areas like that by getting these people hooked up. It'd be wonderful if you could put if you could put a sewer system up there. That's the one thing that would take care of so many issues up there, but obviously that isn't gonna happen. That's all, and I'd like to thank everybody, and again, I'll reiterate, I have the utmost confidence in the environmental health group. I've worked with them over many years, and they're doing really good work, and they're getting things streamlined, and they're getting it set up so it's workable. So again, I thank you guys. If there's any other discussion?
So I would like to bring up something, given this, my concern is that with the revision of the rules in 2024 or 2022, and then with the previous rules, let's say the way they did it prior to that at some point in time, there's gonna be a conflict there could be a conflict between those two things when you come up for repair or, you know, replacement or whatever. And my only hope is that there's some way to mediate that so that we're not putting these applicants or these homeowners in a disadvantageous position, because I know that we speak individually and we deal, and that's part of the problem I had today going through these documents, and I apologize because I've been on an airplane for the last few days. But it seems to me that there's gonna be some conflict. I'm trying to find, how do we resolve those issues, like what happened in 2022 and happened in 2024 with I'll call it a tightening of the regulations, and I'm agnostic as far as those goes, because I think, you know, you've got a job to do and you have to do it, and the board has to do their part. But it seems to me too, that there's instances where when I get a document, for example, the one that I got for this variance in the field, that it looked like, to me, like a foregone conclusion, because I didn't have all the other information, obviously. And I understand you're not gonna send, you don't need to send a book of 300 pages to each one of us. But it is confusing to a degree, because I'm trying to compare those two, you know, what I saw just as legacy information in there with the information we're trying to reconcile today. And I think there is an underlying premise, not a premise, there's an underlying issue for all of us, because I wanna go along with the experts. I mean, I wanna be that guy that says, I rely on expert opinion. So the question I have, is there ever a time anyway that, like, for example, our health board officer would overrule a decision that the health department made based upon some sort of finding or based upon some interpretation of those rules that are different? So, or is it always gonna be are those two always gonna be in lockstep together? And then are we gonna be the final arbiter of those decisions? Because it puts a lot of pressure on us, because I don't wanna vote against everybody here, but I don't wanna be, I'm not a rubber stamp either. I wanna make my own decision and come to my own conclusion, and sometimes that's hard. So when I got this document, it says that the health officer recommends denial, that puts me kind of in a comfortable situation. And even when it's highlighted in red, I remember back in school when I got criticized, it always came in a red pencil or red ink. And so all of a sudden I feel like I'm kind of on my back heels trying to make a decision. So I don't know what the answer is, but I know we're gonna have continuing issues in the future with a lot of these legacies of Martin City, probably up there. Like I said, they've got systems that go back probably 80, 90 years, right? And water tables will fluctuate. I just want everybody to know that I'm pro applicant, and I'm not gonna make any bones about that. And and when I said should or could, should means we should, but could we make an interpretation that's more favorable to the applicant, rather than should we follow this specific or this particular line of thinking? And I don't know that there's an answer to that, at least, you know, as far as rules and regulations, that we're dealing on a singular issue, but none of these issues are singular. This guy, the person today, has a house that's built, and that's a huge investment, right? And those are the kind of things that I agonize over when we go forward. So that's my 2 cents worth, and I hope we have some way to remedy that in the future, that we can come to some way that we can figure out some healthy balance between those two. And, because I think it's gonna become more prevalent as we go along, and I think as the valley grows, and I think as things develop, I think it's gonna be more, you know, we're gonna have to deal with this more often.
Kind of think we've made a mountain out of a molehill here, from the standpoint of all this. Clearly that seepage from the descriptions we got was due to the old drain field, had nothing to do with groundwater. So if they'd just dug another hole and found it didn't have it, we wouldn't even have this discussion. So I don't think it really becomes relevant to worry about this point in time. If there hadn't been a drain field there and that original hole had been dug and they showed seepage, I would not vote in favor of this variance. I'd be doing the groundwater monitoring. You had an alternative explanation for why there was a problem. So really, all this other worry that we have about it probably, you know, doesn't come too much effect, so.
Well, I don't know that that'll give me any comfort in the future or make me less worried about, but I appreciate that understanding, but because it does add, you know, that does add color to what we're talking about.
You would hope that, the rules that were in place when something happened can be carried forward. When you have a stricter rule, say from 2022, and someone is operating under that, and in 2025, says only all of the new rules that have been passed go back, you know, it's not a legacy.
But she didn't have a permit,
We have.
There wasn't
It's
a
like
permit.
grandfathering in things.
but there wasn't a permit.
I understand.
Okay,
So
so
what I'm,
there's
what
a
I'm
difference
saying in
between,
the
yeah, but there's a
future.
difference
No, I'm
between the
saying in the
grandfather.
future, This is what Jim's talking
No,
about.
I get, that's.
Is we are gonna run into issues like that. And you have to be able to look at that from that. If someone was operating under a certain rule, it doesn't have to be groundwater, it could be anything. And all of a sudden you have a new tighter rule, you know, can you apply the tighter rule to the one that was in 2010? How the 2024 rule applied to 2010 technology? Jim?
Sorry to interject. I just wanted to offer that all of these things that you're discussing, we're already encountering that. And I would be more than happy to sit down with any one of the board members and, you know, try and provide any information that may help, these processes go forward. Because I think that there was a tremendous amount of confusion here today, and I'm not confident that we followed the process. Whatever I can do to help that situation and educate folks and provide information so you can digest it and, come to your own conclusions, I'm more than happy to do that.
Thank you. Any further business we brought forward today? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion. Adjourn. Second. Motion's been made, second to adjourn, all in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Listen to you. You had, you said you owned a property. Yeah.